Happening, Awesemo baseball fans. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the afternoon scrambling, trying to get some top packs on our favorite new NFT site. Rocking and rolling. Very baseball focused kind of a day for us. Terry McBride here with Max Smotritskiy and Alex Awesemo Baker, the boss man himself. Alex, Max, how'd you guys make out? I know we were talking a little bit before the show and everybody got a few packs. How'd you find the experience, Alex?
I found the experience pretty miserable, but I got the packs, which is better than I can say from some other NFT sites. So
There you
all in
go,
all,
right?
can't complain.
Yeah, the end result is what matters.
Exactly, yeah. Packs waiting to be opened after the show. Should be fun just ripping through those to take me back to the days when I'm 8 years old, going through real Topps packs, physical cards and everything. We'll get together later on and do the got it, need it, got it game. But yeah, it's a lot of fun with that. And we're going to be rocking and rolling through this slate, I think, guys. We've got a lot of games to talk about. We've got a weird split slate with 12 games now on the DK slate. We lost one to weather, and we've got 8 games on the Fanduel slate, but they're doing a now 3-gamer for those early games that's starting at the 640 window because it's Fanduel, and why not when you can squeeze in a little tiny slate and get a little bit of extra egg from everybody. So we'll be flying through everything, guys. But first up, a little business to take care of as always off the top. You guys like our shows. You follow along with all the different personalities, cover all the different sports that we hit at the site. Everything that you listen to, everything that you watch on YouTube goes up except for Live Before Locks. All of the long-term shows, the strategy shows, everything overnight and in the mornings goes up on your favorite podcast network. So if you get busy, you get called into a meeting with your boss on Zoom, even if you're not wearing pants in the meeting, it doesn't really matter. You're still not able to watch our show. So now you got to catch up on the content. Great way to do that. Download it. Listen to it on your favorite podcast network, favorite podcast app. Leave us a 5-star review when you do that. We're running a little contest. We're giving away a free week every single week. So if you leave us a review, that review stands up. It's good for a year. Leave you eligible. And every single week, we raffle off a week of Awesemo Plus Platinum to somebody who's left us a review. So get in there, 5-star reviews. We are brought to you today by No House Advantage, player prop-based DFS action. Playing against your peers, not the house. You get a $20 bonus on your first deposit when you use the promo code Awesemo. We'll get a little bit more into No House Advantage a little later on. They're a great site, great way to build a bankroll. No House Advantage, promo code Awesemo gets you $20 on your first deposit. We'll go over more of that in a bit. We've got free ownership projections up on the site for MLB today, guys. Free NBA rankings, free NHL stacks if you're into those sports. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. One last thing to touch on. We've got an MMA promo going on for any MMA DFS fans out there. UFC 261 coming up this weekend. Usman versus Masvidal, April 24th. Awesemo's got a great deal on our premium MMA content. Through fight night, through the 24th, you can use promo code UFC261, gets you 50% off your first month of Awesemo MMA. Projections, ownership, top fighters, promo code UFC261. I believe that I heard, and you guys can correct me on this if I'm wrong, that there's going to be 2 pay-per-views included in that first month that you're getting half off of. So that's a pretty sweet deal for the best tools in the industry. Alex, we've talked about it with that top fighter tool that you built. That thing helps me win money. I know Adam was talking about using it, and it helps him be profitable at MMA. What can you tell us just real quick what's in that top fighters tool that these guys can take advantage of before we launch into baseball?
Yeah, I mean, more than any other sport, MMA is all about the leverage because a lot of times, the fights that are likely to yield like a high score because it's just like guys that don't play too much defense or ladies, excuse me.
Right.
Anyway, so it's like helping you figure out the fights that are the most likely to yield the GPP winners and how that compares to ownership and like trying to find those spots where you can gain leverage because when you just use projections, a lot gets lost in the shuffle because like every time there's like one winner and one loser. So if a guy projected low wins, like you got to assume they got a good score.
Mm-hmm. Right. Makes sense. And that, grabbing onto those high leverage plays gets you well ahead of the field when they come through. We saw that, I think, just in hearing everybody talk about it with a pretty low rent fighter coming through with a win in the last time around that was in the projection. So I know Adam called that out earlier in the morning. So guys, ton of great content on the site. As always, hit the like, hit the subscribe. We got a lot of baseball to talk through here. So first up, we've got this wacky split slate. We've got 12 games now on DK. So like we said, the Pittsburgh at Detroit game unfortunately got rained out. That was one I was kind of targeting for bats, to be honest. It was kind of a cake matchup. I liked how the Pirates were looking there, so I was a little upset to see that one go. But just in general, guys, when we've got a split slate like this, do you look at it, Alex, in terms of we're going to look at this as one big portfolio of ownership across the two sites and kind of look for deals across both sites where you're getting players at a different price, particularly on pitching, maybe where you're getting players at different pricing so you can kind of use them differently and wield them across sites like that? Or for baseball, does it kind of zero in one slate, and they're separate animals for you?
I think sometimes
that bark was like right on cue when I said separate animals.
Knowing how like people approach like slates, I feel like people emphasize macro concepts a little bit too much, where like what really matters is what each individual lineup being like a good lineup. I mean, like when it comes to diversification, I guess you might want to not have your night hinge on one player because it just is a little bit stressful. So I don't think it's like necessarily bad to hedge a little bit and not like go all in on any particular player, because I feel like it's unusual where like you really need one player to be profitable like in the long run. So I think it's all personal preference. So I kind of leave it open-ended, my advice, where you can approach it with more diversified portfolios, and that doesn't necessarily like hurt your chances much, and it kind of makes it a little bit easier to sweat, but it's not going to increase your bottom line. It's just going to kind of make the grind a little bit easier.
Yeah, maybe soften the blow in a very high variance sport if that's what you're looking for. I play on one site, so that doesn't apply to me at all, to be quite honest. Max, how do you approach a slate like this, where now we've got 3 games on that wacky little Fanduel slate? We've got 8 of them later on, assuming everything holds up. And then we've got a full 12-game DK slate. Just in general, what are your thoughts across the two sites in terms of how you would maybe approach the differently shaped slates before we get into game by game?
Yeah, so for me, the shorter the slate, the more I want to use ownership leverage, just because ownership gets concentrated on a few guys and it's much easier to pivot off of them. So on large slates like 12 games, I mean, I feel like ownership is going to be really spread out, especially on the stacks. So there, I don't really care about the ownership as far as hitters go. I just try to not play the super chalky pitchers. But on short slates, like even last night, we got a 6-game slate at night. It was really easy to pivot off of the really chalky hitters or pitchers.
Makes sense. It wasn't that easy for me because I was on the NBA show at the time and we were rocking through news. That was a fun one. That was a heck of a lot of news to be trying to process while building baseball lineups. So it was fun. Went a little sideways for me overall, but it was a fun night anyway. So guys, first up, time to get into the game by games here. But everybody hit the like, hit the subscribe. Make sure that you subscribe, guys. We've got all kinds of shows going on, especially while we're covering 3 major sports and then all these other sports going on at once. We've got PGA, we've got MMA. Pretty sure NASCAR is going on. I think they're still turning left. So there's just so much going on out there. We have shows going live all day long. So if you subscribe, you get the little pop-up notifications. You don't miss a thing. If you do miss them, they're on the podcast networks. Moving on, Atlanta Braves coming into the Bronx, taking on our New York Yankees. Max, we've got Charlie Morton on the hill. Braves plus 111 dogs with a 4.12 implied run total. Yanks minus 120 favorites, 4.46 implied run total. Charlie Morton on the hill for the Braves. Jamison Taijuan going for the Yanks. Max, talk to me about the pitching in this one. What do you like?
Yeah, I mean, I like Morton. It's a little weird of a lineup for the Yankees here. Brett Gardner is batting 3rd. Mike Ford is batting 6th. Yeah, they're trying to mix it up a little bit, throw a bunch of lefties in there against Morton. But yeah, Morton was like mega chalk last time. He's had really good stuff, had a 14% swinging strike rate, mid-3s on the xFIP, but did give up 5 earned runs. So maybe people will be off of him today. He's only projected to be 5% owned in our top pitchers tool. I really like the leverage I get with playing Morton here, just because the Yankees strike out so much right now. And his stuff was really good, especially where all the power in the Yankees really comes from the right side, and he really dominates right-handed hitters.
Yeah, it is. It is a very nice looking matchup in terms of Morton's ability to strike some of these hitters out. You know, we saw him struggle a little bit especially in the early part of last year, but it seems like he's back to his old self so far. 29.6% strikeout rate. Strikeouts are well up across the league. I was looking at it last night. Some of the splits, particularly against righties, just significantly up in the bottom half of the overall rankings. Yanks among that group. So yeah, there's significant strikeouts here. Alex, you seeing it the same way? Charlie Morton, as far as a pitcher, would you be getting to any Yankees bats going back up against him the other way?
So I think the matchup is definitely a negative. The Yankees lineup today, it doesn't strike out a ton, and they got a lot of power like usual. So this is a little bit weird that Brett Gardner is batting third, but still got a pretty solid one. Morton's stuff is good enough that he's worth taking some shots on at 5% ownership on DraftKings, but I don't see him as a priority.
So given that it's a weird Yankees lineup, but maybe one that is in a overrated spot in terms of the strikeouts that are there, does that maybe lead you to some of these Yankees bats? And would it be those ones in the middle, the typical ones, the Aaron Judges, Giancarlo Stantons, Gleyber Torres, DJ LeMahieu's of the world? Or are you willing to maybe move around to a guy who's hitting in a weird spot like Brett Gardner?
I feel like the Yankees probably aren't a stack I'm going to be targeting a ton. So they have a tough matchup versus Morton. That kind of balances out because they have a nice park for bats. But the other thing I'm thinking is that they're a home team and they're projected for only 4.7 runs. So it's like they don't get that extra inning if they're winning. That hurts. And I think there's some other better spots.
And now we've got the very strong Braves lineup that has come down a little bit with, I guess, the loss of Adam Duvall against righty pitchers, but still excellent against right-handed pitching. Jameson Taillon kind of struggling to get back a little bit. The 26.3% strikeout rate is nice in his 8 innings that he's thrown so far this year, both 4.57 xFIP and a 1.44 WHIP. Just, you know, a guy really rounding into form after his second Tommy John surgery. We can't really hold that against him. Are we throwing Braves bats at Jameson Taillon here? I assume nobody really wants any part of Taillon as a starter in this spot, particularly not for 9,200 on DraftKings. Maybe 68. You can take a few shots on FanDuel. Let's start there. Are either of you guys rostering Jameson Taillon as a pitcher?
Nope.
Didn't think so.
Yeah,
Alex?
I mean, Braves lineup's pretty tough.
What do you like in that lineup?
Well, Freddie Freeman is a great hitter. Looks like Acuna isn't in the lineup today, which I'm still recovering from my gaffe the other night where I said Bryce Harper was on the Nationals.
Acuna's not going anywhere. He's going to be on the Braves for a long time. You're good.
That hurts their lineup, but it's still overall a very good lineup, even with a higher Adrianza replacing him as leadoff bat. So I think this is a stay away game for me.
Roger. Max, you got a favorite bat from the Braves side before we move on to the next one? We got to keep the pace here.
Pablo Sandoval, 2.2K.
Ooh, all right. That wasn't one that leapt out to me, but yeah, a nice little discount. 2,000 on FanDuel, hitting 6. I'll take that any day. Why not? A little resurgence for Pablo. Moving on, we've got the Arizona Diamondbacks in Cincinnati taking on the Reds. Zach Gallen going for the Diamondbacks. They're a 130 dog with a 3.47 implied total. Reds minus 141 favorite with a 4.10 with Luis Castillo, excellent pitcher on the hill. For me, on that wacky early FanDuel slate, he was by far the standout pitcher already. Gallen on the other side of this one was the number 2 there. We get more options, of course, to work with on the DK slate. Where do these pitchers rank for you guys in terms of DK on the larger slate? Are you going to either of these pitchers? Max?
Yeah, I mean, I love both of them. There's supposed to be some weather here, but I'm not sure if it's arriving late or not. If it's arriving late, it's even better for the pitchers. Maybe they can luck into like a complete game somewhere. So that's not bad. But yeah, I mean, Gallen came back from his injury. His last start, he looked great. Really good swinging miss stuff. Didn't throw too many pitches, but they're just going to work him back into shape. I love Gallen to 8.6K. I don't think he's going to be as owned as he should be just because of that elevated price tag and the amount of options we have in the 7K range. And then Castillo on the other side at 7.3K. Again, just way too cheap. I know he was the chalk last time against the Giants, and he kind of got beat up a little bit. But his stuff still looked great. He had a 2x FIP, and he gave up like 4 runs, like whatever. It happens. The swinging miss stuff is there, and the fastball is actually trending up as far as velocity goes. So we always like to see that. Yeah, I love both pitchers.
Alex, how much Castillo are you going to have in a matchup against Arizona? Their strikeout rate is actually respectable. They rank, let's see, they are ninth best in baseball, including this season, going back to the start of the 2019 season against right-handed pitching with the active roster. Does that concern you at all with Castillo, ability for strikeout upside here? Or are you going to him anyway?
Yeah, I mean, Castillo, he is interesting because he hasn't had a great season to this point. I remember that opening day, I think he had 0 strikeouts or something. So I'm trying to look up more of the advanced stats here. It looks like his swinging strike rate in 2019, 2020 was in the 15s, and this year it's in the 12s. Now 12.7% this year, that's still pretty good. So I feel pretty confident that Castillo is a lot better than the $7,300 price tag. The matchup, although Arizona's lineup isn't particularly exciting, it doesn't have a ton of strikeouts either. So I do think the price tag on Castillo is a little bit too low, but I don't think he's like a lock play, kind of like the ownership suggests.
And then what about the bats on this one, Alex? Are you willing to roster any of the Reds bats? They're the more interesting lineup to me. Just that I like Jesse Winker and his power up top. We've seen some flashes from Tyler Naquin this year. Eugenio Suarez, Joey Votto, Mike Moustakas. We kind of know what we're getting in that trio. Excellent hitters there. Any of these Reds stacking up for you?
Gallen is a pretty good pitcher, so that does hurt their chances a little bit. The team totals are very low in this one, and I'm looking at the weather. It looks like it's going to be in the 60s, kind of declining. Just a note on the weather here, Max, you mentioned it. Possibly like it looks like there might be weather like later in the evening, so this isn't one where we're worried about like a delay or postponement. But it looks like maybe in the latest forecast it's going to hit around 10, so that would be good timing for the game to play in full. I'd be more willing to go to Gallen, to be honest, because his strikeout rate is pretty good. It was 27% last year, and so far this year over 1 star has been better. So I think he's a solid option. The ownership of 20 is pretty high, but I think he's going to be a good one tonight.
Yeah, Gallen actually surprised me. He popped to second on my board overall in the combined slates. It's Fanduel projections, but I've got everything kind of mashed together so I can talk through it on the show. And he was my second highest projected starter overall. So I was a little bit surprised by that. But it sounds like we're focused more on the pitching on this one. Max, is that jibe for you? Are you willing to go to any of these Red stacks or Diamondback stacks before we move on? And if so, which guys in them do you like?
12-game slate, not a priority.
I hear you. All right, so we lost the Pittsburgh game. Pittsburgh at Detroit, that one's not on the board anymore, but we do still have the Baltimore Orioles coming in with a surprisingly only 109 plus 109 dogs with a 4.14 implied total. Going into Miami, taking on the Marlins with a minus 118 favorites with a 4.44 implied total. Matt Harvey on the hill for the Baltimore Orioles, the pitcher formerly known as Matt Harvey, against Nick Neidert. I was getting some pretty solid power numbers here on the Miami Marlins bats. I don't think there's much to talk about in terms of rostering these arms, although if you're playing that short slate on FanDuel, you've only got a few arms to work with. I would try my best to skip them. I would not be rostering Matt Harvey. I guess I could talk myself into Nick Neidert if I really needed to, but it's not a good spot. On the bat side of things, are you guys seeing it the same way I am, that there are pretty solid power upside here for Miami going up against Matt Harvey here? Guys giving up a ton of homers, ton of power over the last couple of years, struggling to stay relevant, stay in the league at all. Alec, what are you thinking of Miami here?
I am a little bit more tepid on Miami, I'd say. Although Matt Harvey has had a lot of rough seasons in recent memory, does look like, at least for the start of the year, his numbers look almost exactly the same. I guess I must have misremembered. So I think he's a good pitcher to target against, but Miami's lineup just isn't that good. They have very good pricing, so that's why we're seeing the ownership come in almost double the top stack probability, which is kind of a red flag where it does look like that's the type of team I try to avoid because they kind of rope you in by the prices, but then on the nights where they go off, like you need a higher score to win because of the ownership.
Sure. And that makes sense that they're getting that ownership both by virtue of the fact that they're matched up against Matt Harvey, which is something that maybe the public sees and says, okay, I know he's not pitching well. Let me attack that. And like you mentioned, they're pretty inexpensive bats to get to with that on top. Max, are you willing to eat any chalk going to the Marlins in that case? Get a little value out of it against a bad pitcher, or is that kind of the same thing for you where you're looking maybe go other directions? And if so, how would you diversify that stack to get to different constructions?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me just because I don't play that many lineups and I try to utilize leverage as much as possible. So, like in this stack, I think there's not a lot of power upside. The park kind of sucks for power anyway. And like Matt Harvey's bad. Like my note for him is Harvey still sucks. But just saying that he's not as bad as he was, when he was just coming back from his injuries. He's still giving up a ton of fly balls, but that's actually not that bad here in a park that limits power. So I'm not as interested in Miami just because of their ownership. I actually like the Orioles side a little bit more.
Okay. Talk to me about the Orioles side going up against Nick Neidert. 9 innings pitched this year, only a 15% strikeout rate, walked 22.5% of the hitters he's faced in that tiny sample. Talk to me about the Orioles side. What do you like over there?
Yeah, I mean, Neidert is the worst pitcher on the slate. You saw him against Atlanta, I think just like 5 days ago. We were on the same show talking about him. And he's supposed to be like a ground ball guy that limits hard contact. He doesn't get many strikeouts, but he's not limiting hard contact or getting the ground balls. So this Oriole lineup has some power around it. Mancini, Santander, these guys have power. Mullins gets on base a ton, actually steals bases, which you don't see anymore really. They're the road team, so they get an extra inning. I really like this Orioles stack here with just going 1 through 5 or even including Rio Ruiz or Cisco for some power in the bottom of their line.
I like it. And just going back to that same point on the other side of this one, you see Baltimore ranked a little bit higher than Miami on the top stacks board with positive leverage. So that's the kind of spot that maybe we're looking into an underrated stack there, underappreciated by the public. Alex, are you getting to what's your favorite bat on the Orioles if you're stacking them? Let's put it that way, and then we'll move on.
Santander is a guy that has a lot of power. He's batting second, so that makes a lot of sense. But the one guy, I think Trey Mancini is going to go a little bit low owned because he's 5,200. That's just like almost 1,000 more than anyone else on the team. So that tends to pull ownership away to other guys. So that's the kind of guy that you definitely want to go out of your way to get because he has the most power of anyone on the team, batting cleanup. So don't let your optimizer force you to pick around the best player.
I like it. 35 home runs in 679 plate appearances in 2019. That's a great spot if nobody's going to be on him. Yeah, makes a lot of sense to pay up for. 3,700 on Fanduel, a little bit easier to fit him into those stacks, but it will probably draw a little bit of extra ownership to him in that case. I wouldn't leave out Michael Franco and DJ Stewart either if we're building Orioles stacks. I think top 5 there is pretty good go-to spot. Guys, moving on, we picked up a little bit of pace there. We got a little bit of room, but we got to keep an eye on the clock. Something to watch for everybody out there. We've got a ton of sports going on, like we talked about with the pop-ups for the shows. That's why you want to like, that's why you want to subscribe. But when you get to the site, speaking of subscriptions, we've got all sorts of different packages at all sorts of different price ranges. We have the plan that will meet your DFS needs and budget. I guarantee it. We have weekly, we have monthly, we have annual. We've got our express plan for $4.95 a week that gets you Alex's projection-based rankings and ownership-based rankings for DFS. So that's a great spot to start out for new people who are trying to figure out what to do, what the projections even mean. It really boils everything down to a nice ranking system. But where the real value is on the site, particularly if you're playing more than one sport, like let's face it, most of us do, is at the platinum level. The Platinum Weekly subscription gets you access to everything that we do on the site. Every single sport we cover, projections, ownership, all the tools like the top stacks, the top pitchers, the boom bust tool for basketball, our lineup builder, our premium Slack where we're all hanging out, talking shop, answering questions all day. $29.95 a week, guys. That is a phenomenal deal. If you're playing $5 entries, that's what, 6 entries? That's not that much coming off the top if you think of it in terms of what you're putting into these contests. It will improve your game. Stop guessing, start winning. Sign up at awesemo.com. Like and subscribe. Free ownership today at the site. Hit the premium Slack if you do join up at the site, or if you're already a member and you're not using it, you are missing out. Like I said, we're all hanging out in there. We've got the DFS 101 channel giving lessons all day long. We've got a channel for every single sport that we cover. Everybody's in there talking shop. We've got a great little community. Come on in and say hi. Win a contest with our avatar. We've got the Awesemo Hall of Fame going on. Tweeted at Awesemo Hall of Fame, HOF, Awesemo HOF. You get eligible to win, you do win if you hit a top 3 in a contest that has more than 5,000 entries and you're using our avatar. You win yourself a free month of platinum. You're eligible to win once a year. We probably have an Awesemo Hall of Fame read that I forgot to put in here that would name all the great people who tweeted us screenshots. So they'll congratulate you on the next show, guys, because I forgot to put it in here. But congratulations. You won yourself a free month of platinum. Guys, make sure you're doing that. Make sure to use the logo. It is silly to pass that up. If you're out there winning contests, it can be a contest of any buy-in. Guys, think we covered a lot right there. Let's knock out 2 games before we get on to the next little promo. We've got the St. Louis Cardinals. They're a plus 115 dog with a 4.56 implied total. Coming into Washington, taking on the Nats and struggling Patrick Corbin. Nats are favored minus 124 favorites with a 5.03 implied total. Adam Wainwright going for the Cards, Pat Corbin going for the Nationals. Alex, take us any direction you want to go. What's the most important thing in this game for you?
I think the Nationals look like they're pretty pricey on Draftkings, but they're relatively cheap on Fanduel. So we're seeing a massive ownership gap here. Where on Draftkings they're 7% owned as a team. On Fanduel they're 13% owned. So this one's going to be a little bit site specific. On Fanduel, it looks like the first 4 batters in the order have huge ownership. The next 4 have low ownership. So I would mix and match those guys if you go to that stack. Same with DraftKings, but everyone's a little bit lower owned. So if you start throwing in some guys from the bottom of the order, you could get a little different. But then now I'm looking at these guys: Josh Harrison, Starlin Castro, Yan Gomes, and Robles. It's like none of them have a lot of upside. So it's hard to get overly excited about. What are you guys thinking about the national stack?
Max, you want to take that one? Because I'll throw a little bit of love into the bottom end of the Nationals order there. I've been a Starlin Castro fan. He's been a 20 homer cut guy a few times in his career. And Victor Robles, ton of upside in that kid. 28 stolen bases and 17 home runs and 617 plate appearances two years ago. Max, take it away and talk to us about the bottom end of that lineup and whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I'm not interested. Wainwright is still serviceable against righties. He really struggles against lefties. Like, this guy should have been out of the league like 2 years ago, but he just won't die. So for some reason, people still swing and miss at his curveball, even though it's never in the zone. So yeah, I mean, I'm not that interested in the Nat stack. I'm not going to talk about the Cardinals purposefully because I'm playing them, and every time I've mentioned them as a stack, they have failed miserably. So I think they're a good play, but other than that, I'm going to let Alex talk about the Cardinals.
I'm with you on that one. I like the Cards. I chose not to write them up yesterday. Went with the Giants instead, and of course they went off. I was talking about the Cardinals at like 9 a.m. yesterday in a DM, and then I didn't write them up. I hate doing that. Alex, what do you like on the Cardinals side of things? Throwing bats at Pat Corbin. Is anybody rostering either of these pitchers in anything other than a one roster here or there, if that?
Nope.
Yeah, I don't really see a need to. And by the way, I think Adam Wainwright threw one curveball into the strike zone in his entire career, and Carlos Beltran still wasn't.
That's so true.
Alex, talk to me about Cardinals bats here. You going to the Card side of things?
The thing I like most about the Cards is they won us all the money last night. So that's almost a situation where, like, I don't think anyone really chases in baseball to a large extent, but there isn't really any reason the Cardinals are popping out. Corbin He's inconsistent, but overall has been pretty solid in his career. This year had a really rough start. I think he didn't make it more than an inning in his first start or something like that. So his stats look rough, but I think we know he's not bad. The Cardinals are tough because they don't have a lot of batters that have a ton of power or stolen base upsides. So really you're trying to pick the right matchups and parks, and I don't see much reason to go there tonight.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, Pat Corbin, this guy is I was invested in for a $1 discounted salary, and he was a great deal the last couple of years. And then last year and this year kind of is earning that $1 salary, exactly that $1 salary in my season long league. Guys, let's move on. We got to pick up the pace a little bit. I think San Francisco Giants plus 138 dogs with a 3.87 implied total at Philadelphia. Phillies minus 150 favorites with a 4.72 implied total. Logan Webb on the hill for the Giants taking on Zach Wheeler. I'm going to do a little bit of Zach Wheeler here. I think he's an interesting pitcher. Pretty good at limiting hard contact, pretty good at keeping the ball in the yard. Going up against the Giants lineup that, like I said, was popping a little bit yesterday, but today, very suppressed numbers for me against Wheeler. Suppressed pricing as well, especially on the Fanduel slate. So I think maybe it makes sense to take some shots there as a low-owned value stack. But I'm not getting to a ton of Giants naturally, and I am getting to a good amount of Wheeler. I think that makes sense. Alex, are you seeing that the same way? Is Wheeler a spot you want to go to for pitching here?
Wheeler, he's a guy that doesn't get a ton of strikeouts. So in 2020, his strikeout rate was 18%, which obviously that was significantly lower than we're used to. So if you go back 2 years, 23%. So at that point, so I'm kind of comparing this to a number of 26% this year.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the advanced stats to try to figure out which we should expect. His swinging strike rate has been like almost the same every one of these years. So like I think it's somewhere in between there where he's just kind of an average strikeout guy. And then the matchup isn't great for strikeouts either. So San Francisco, not a great team, but they don't have a lot of guys that really swing and miss. So not my favorite pitcher on tonight's slate.
Yeah, and that's a great point, actually. This San Francisco lineup, very good at avoiding strikeouts, particularly Tommy La Stella coming up top is just excellent at it. But through the lineup, they are above average in preventing strikeouts or avoiding strikeouts, I should say. Max, are you seeing that similarly? And any interest for you in going to Logan Webb, or is this more about the bats for you? And if so, which ones?
It's actually kind of an avoid game for me. It does look like the wind's blowing out and it's warm in Philadelphia, which is always nice. But yeah, Wheeler doesn't really give up hard contact, but doesn't really strike many guys out, like Alex said. So at 9.8K, he's an avoid for me. Logan Webb, I don't like the matchup for the righties against him. But the lefties like Joyce, Harper, and Miller, and Joyce and Miller are way underpriced.
Yeah.
Joyce doesn't really hit for power, but Miller does. So Miller I'm more interested in than Joyce, but Joyce at the top of the lineup at 2.8K makes perfect sense as well if you're trying to save some money. I like the lefties here for the Phillies. I don't know if I like a full stack as much as I like the one-offs or even like a three-man stack. But yeah, the pitchers are an avoid for me.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty apt is maybe you take a small stack with them or maybe you take them as one-offs because I'm a little concerned about the back end of that lineup. Mickey Moniak in there, Nick Maiden. I don't know who that is. That's actually a new name for me. That surprised me. Alex, you seeing that before we move on, seeing the Phillies kind of the same way, get to some of the obvious names if you're going that way and maybe not mess too much with the bottom end?
The Phillies are so insanely cheap today that is almost a reason to go to them, but usually pulls a ton of ownership as well. So I noticed Matt Joyce and Brad Miller have really good spots in the order for the price. 2K on FanDuel each, and then in the low 2Ks for Draftkings. So those would be great cash targets. I think the stack is fine. It is a little bit overowned today, but maybe if you avoid some of the value kind of trap plays, you can make it work.
Yeah, and that's interesting too. Looking at the top stacks tool on the site, it's definitely a little spot with another negatively leveraged team. They rank out a little bit higher than what I was expecting them to, though. So that's an interesting surprise. I'm gonna have to look at that a little bit more when we get off the shows. And guys, I recommend that. That's a big part of my process, and very very helpful piece of what you guys have access to on the site with those subscriptions that we talk to. Another thing that you guys have access to is our promo that we're running with our pals, No House Advantage, the sponsor of today's show. They're doing a little bit of a different spin on daily fantasy sports. They're offering player prop contests across MLB, NBA, NFL, PGA, cash prizes, of course. You're competing against your peers, your friends, the public out there in general. You're not competing against the house, but you're using prop bet based systems to enter your contests. It's an exclusively peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform, levels the playing field, makes it easier for you to win real cash compared with traditional DFS sites, smaller contests. They're using Overlay as a promotional tool right now. So we had entries yesterday. Josh and I were talking about it on the basketball show. We have all sorts of stuff going on with these guys. They have over 500 player prop offerings. No House Advantage, the largest provider of player props in the industry. Best part is you can download the No House Advantage app today, receive a $20 bonus on your first deposit when you use promo code Awesemo. Beat your friends, not the house. Win big with player props today. No House Advantage. Guys, moving on. Toronto Blue Jays at the Boston Red Sox. Blue Jays, this one's coming in basically even up. We've got Hyunjin Ryu, Blue Jays with a 4.26 implied total against Eduardo Rodriguez with a 4.32 total for the Red Sox. Max, why don't you take us through the pitching on this one? Which one of these pitchers do you like? Do you like either one?
So for me in this spot, let me pull this up. I just lost.
You want me to jump to Alex?
No. So for Ryu and Rodriguez, right?
Yep.
So for the pitchers here, they're both really good, and the lineups are really good facing. So like it's almost an avoid spot where the stacks really don't jump out at me just because the starters all have decent stats. Like Ryu completely shut down the Yankees last start. His xFIP is like in the mid threes. He's getting swings and misses, even though like his stuff doesn't look great on paper. Where, it's just like a mid-90s fastball, like a low 90s fastball, I should say.
Yep.
And then, just good change, good slider. But yeah, like this stack against him is super expensive. And even though it's in Fenway, where we love to target hitters, I'm not really that interested in the Red Sox stack. And on the other side, Eduardo Rodriguez, even though he's not throwing as hard as we've seen him, he used to be like mid-90s. Now he's about 92, which is a little bit concerning. The Blue Jay stack is also like all these good hitters. So the pitchers in the mid 8Ks are an avoid for me. And I'm really not that interested in the hitters. Although if I'm making 150 lineups, I would stack these teams just in case the pitcher just doesn't have it because they are that good where they can win you the slate. But in like single entry and 3 max, I'm not getting to.
Alex, is that similar for you in terms of, are you getting to either of these pitchers, and are you seeing maybe some upside in the fact that, these teams do rank a little bit down the board in terms of our top stacks board when we look at the bats, but there's a little bit of leverage, at least on the Sox, and the Blue Jays are around on where they should be. Does that appeal to you at all in terms of getting to these stacks maybe in small shares, Alex?
I think the stacks are somewhat interesting. It looks like Toronto stack actually is pulling pretty decent ownership on DraftKings and Fanduel, which it's a little surprising because going up against Eduardo Rodriguez, the caveat is we didn't see him last year. So going off a pretty small sample of recent data, but he's been solid in his 2 starts. The pricing is pretty high on DraftKings in particular for the Blue Jays. The one thing that's making me think that there's potential here is just the park, where Fenway is a great batter's park. The weather here is going to be in the 60s, which is a little bit higher than some other spots today. So not horrible. And then, as Max was saying, if they can get past the first guy, then they're not going to be facing good pitchers. So it has a little bit more upside. So this could be an interesting one to target at low ownership. Although, to be honest, Toronto is surprisingly high owned compared to my expectations.
Yeah, I just reloaded the page I was looking at there, and Toronto is more negatively leveraged than I remembered them being earlier, particularly on the FanDuel slate. Boston kind of stood out for me a little bit in terms of I was getting surprising, not ridiculous power numbers on them with the projected lineup, but the lineup that they're actually rolling out today, kind of disappointed in the construction. I would certainly hope that they'd hit Hunter Renfroe higher in the lineup than 7th, particularly when they're working in Marlon Gonzalez immediately above him. And Christian Arroyo is hitting 2nd with Enrique Gonzalez leading off. I do like still the JD Martinez, Xander Bogaerts, Christian Vasquez, and then I can get to Renfroe and Dahlbeck hitting 7 and 8, but it's not the construction I would love in terms of stacking these Red Sox. Max, what pops for you about the Red Sox bats if you are going to them in small shares?
I mean, Martinez has been so good this year, but 5.8K versus Ryu is just so hard to get to, especially on the slate. It's just like, for me, there's 12 games and we have some really bad pitchers. So I don't know I don't see any reason to stack against Ryu other than just getting a little bit of leverage. Like in our top stacks tool, these teams are projected about 4% of being the top stack. Yeah. That's just not high enough for me to make them my priority.
Makes sense. Yeah, I do like going down the board a little bit, looking for some of those teams that are similarly ranked. But on today's stack, it is a little bit more stratified between the top and like the middle there. So I agree with that. I'll dive in and I'll grab some leverage with some Sox lineups, maybe a few Blue Jays as well. But it's not the most comfortable spot against very good pitchers. Moving to more question mark kind of pitchers, I think anyway. But in freezing cold Chicago, we've got the New York Mets as minus 121 favorites on the road going into Chicago, taking on the Cubbies, plus 112 dogs, 3.63 implied total for the Cubs, 3.94 for the Mets. Taijuan Walker on the hill for the Mets, taking on Jake Arrieta at home. Alex, you're in Chicago. Talk to me about how cold and ridiculous it is there right now and what effect that's going to have on the potential for offense in this game and the pitching in this game.
Well, I can tell you it's great weather in Chicago for playing DFS right now. As far as playing baseball, probably not so much. Which is making me, I kind of like Taijuan Walker as maybe a contrarian play. He had a slower year last year. We had a 21% K rate, but he's gotten that up over the first few starts here in 2021. And the weather is a little bit of a bump. The strikeouts in the Cubs lineup are a little bit above average. So he's not the highest name pitcher, but it does look like there's some sneaky potential here.
I like that. And then anything on the other side with Jake Arrieta, or are you kind of giving him a pass? And are you looking at Mets bats in that, if that's the case, Alex?
I'm probably just fading both because Arrieta just doesn't get strikeouts, which is what we're looking for in fantasy. He was at 17% last year and he's at 19% so far, significantly below average. And then the Mets lineup is good, but then you're thinking like the weather is a significant negative. So those kind of cancel out and it's just kind of a mediocre spot.
Max, any love for the bats on either side of this one? Got Ian Happ up top, Rizzo, Kris Bryant, Jock Peterson to throw at Taijuan Walker, maybe a up and down kind of variety. Any love for that spot, or is it kind of a pass?
Nah, pass. Taijuan Walker revival. Sounds like a band, but he's good again, and he's cheap. I really actually like him on the slate, especially with the weather. He's got his fastball back, so I'm not interested in the Cubs. The Mets bats are interesting just because Arrieta is bad. And he's especially bad versus lefties, and they have a lot of good lefties. But the weather just is so cold. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be outside in this weather, much less playing baseball.
Yeah, and that narrative is just dominating everything right now. And the Mets are still drawing some ownership, to be honest. It's not through the roof by any means, but there's a bunch of players in that lineup that are in the 10s to mid-teens on the Fanduel slate, a little bit lower on DK for most of them. But yeah, a little concerning there for the Mets, and not necessarily a spot where I'm going to go to their offense nearly as much as I would on a nice day against Jake Arrieta. Let's put it that way. Moving on, we've got Rich Hill on the mound for the Tampa Bay Rays going into Kansas City. Rays are a 107 favorite on the road with a 3.82 implied total, taking on KC. They're minus 101, so it's a pretty close matchup here. 3.76 implied total for Kansas City with Brad Keller on the mound. Soft contact and ground ball specialist Brad Keller, kind of suppressing Tampa Bay's usual upside in the power metrics for me. Are you guys seeing that similarly? Anybody willing to roster a pitcher from either side of this game? Both low cost, kind of low end pitchers for DFS purposes right now. Alex, what are you doing as far as pitching in this one?
Yeah, Rich Hill, he's lost it, I think, because he used to be a guy that, I mean, he had some really good like off-speed pitches, but he just hasn't been getting the swinging strikes over the past couple seasons. Not a huge sample, but his swinging strike number was 10.7% in 2019. In 2020 to 21, it dropped to 6.5%. So that's pretty low. It's going to be hard for him to get the strikeouts. You need DFS with that.
Yeah, this is just kind of a stay away spot for me in terms of the pitching. Keller's a guy I've gone to every now and then, just in terms of his ability to get through a game. That's usually more of a short slate play for me. With this many pitching options, I don't feel like we need to do it. Max, are you getting the bats from the Rays? You getting bats from the Royals going up against Rich Hill? Which side of this one do you prefer in terms of stacking these teams?
I mean, I watched the same matchup yesterday in the same weather, and everybody just looked miserable. So it's hard to get the bats when it's another 40-degree game, especially like against Keller. I know he got blown up the first two starts, but like you said, he's a ground ball guy, usually limits damage. And these Rays now, they're kind of like striking out versus everybody and hitting just a bunch of like lazy fly balls. I'm not that interested. I would be interested in this Royal stack normally because like Alex said, I think Rich Hill's done. So I don't know. Like, I think I might still look at them even with this weather, just because there's so much power from the right side of the plate here.
So who are we thinking in terms of that? Sal Perez, Jorge?
Yeah, Sal Perez, Santana, Merrifield steals some bases, power. Soler is still like insanely cheap. I know he hasn't had the power that he usually does yet, but it's a small sample. The guy usually hits in a mile. Even Hunter Dozier, like coming back, I always used to like playing him versus lefties as well.
Yeah, and it's an interesting lineup. We've talked about it a bunch of different times, but just from in terms of a nice blend of power and speed from different guys up and down the lineup, they stack together in interesting ways too. A lot of multi-position eligibility across the sites. Alex, you going to roll out any Royal stack despite the freezing cold before we move on?
I don't think so. It looks like they have really low ownership, like you guys are saying, but the pricing is pretty high. For the top of the order at least, so it's a low probability play. That's not good value. I don't think that's the best spot.
Okay, we've only got a handful of games left, guys. I promise you we're gonna find the bats that Alex does like, but before we get to that, we're gonna talk about the MMA promo one more time. Coming up, it's pretty simple, guys. We've got UFC 261 coming up. It's Usman versus Masvidal this weekend, 424. The promo's valid through that fight night, through 424, 50% off your first month of Awesemo MMA. Gets you our projections, gets you the top fighters tool that we were talking about, makes all the difference for somebody who knows nothing about MMA like I do. Gets you the ownership, all the tools that you need to build winning MMA lineups. Alex talked about how important it is to have that data at your fingertips, to find those leverage plays, to find those high upside, low probability of maybe not what the field is thinking of coming through, but Alex sees it a different way in his model, and you can pick off those winning spots, those underdog wins. It really, really helps. It is the key tool to winning in MMA. So get in there. We've got UFC 261, the letters UFC, the numbers 261. Gets you 50% off your first month of Awesemo MMA, valid through 424. Stop guessing, start winning. We've also got No House Advantage one last time as our sponsor. Get over there. You get $20 bonus on your first deposit with promo code Awesemo. And then look down the screen a little below the video window you're watching here. Hit the little thumbs up. Give us a little love, little like, and then hit the subscribe button so you get all our notifications. We're going to rock through these last three games. We got about 10 minutes to do it. I think we're plenty fine. Got the Houston Astros in a Coors Field game. I think we might be talking about some bats here. Houston Astros favored minus 113 favorites, 5.42 implied total, taking on the Colorado Rockies in Colorado. Plus 104 dogs with a 5.19 total. Luis Garcia against John Gray. I've talked a few times about how John Gray does know how to pitch at Coors Field, is a good pitcher. That's, again, more something I might be considering on a shorter slate. This is not that slate. I'm not touching either pitcher here. I don't imagine you guys are. Max, why don't we start off by talking about which bats you like in this game, and then we can wind back to pitching if anybody has an objection.
I wish we had the Astros lineup out. We don't. Yeah, I mean, a bunch of their guys are still on the COVID list. So it's still like the cheaper, stranger guys that we aren't really that used to. But I mean, they still have power on upside. I know Gray knows how to pitch at Coors, but he's just not the same pitcher that he was in the beginning. of his career. He's been avoiding barrels, but his xFIP's been in the fives. So at some point he's going to get blown up. Might as well be here. So I know our top stacks tool loves the Astros, and I do too. Really up and down the lineup, but my main targets are going to be Bregman, Gurriel, Tucker, and Correa, and I'm just going by the projected lineup. So when the actual lineup comes out, that might change. But those are the guys that I really like.
Yeah, and it looks like the public is really going toward the Astros side of things here as well on both sites. So, Alex, for you, are you going to the Astros and eating some of the chalk at Coors Field? Are you considering maybe going to the Rockies against Luis Garcia? No reason to expect that they're not also in a very good spot here and significantly lower ownership for the Colorado Rockies at pretty reasonable pricing, honestly, for a Coors Field game. Does that have appeal for you?
Yeah, I think I have to admit I like a bat event like eventually, and this is as good a game as any, I guess. Sorry to be so chalk donkey to want to stack Coors, but Houston, although like as you guys mentioned, there's some guys out. It looks like most of the guys have either stolen bases or power, with the exception of the catcher, and then you have the best conditions in baseball in Coors Field. So I think the Astros will be hard to avoid tonight. That being said, I think you can find some spots to mix it up. Like I see Kyle Tucker is one of the highest owned players on the slate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind, since we have to pick 4 or 5 of these guys, maybe just picking 5 and not picking Tucker, because it's just like the price that's driving everyone there. And then on the Rockies side, the thing I like about the stack is the good players are priced up, which should drive down the ownership of the stack as a whole. So you can find some interesting value at pitcher, which kind of opens up McMahon, Story, and Blackman, even though they are kind of expensive tonight.
Yeah, I like those 3 guys off the top. I would get to some Raimel Tapia, a lot of speed in him, and then I definitely wouldn't leave CJ Cron out of things just with the ridiculous power that he's got in that bat. So, Max, are you seeing that similarly in terms of the Rockies stack? And you guys can just both shake your heads when I ask, is anybody rostering either pitcher?
No pitchers for me. But Luis Sage Garcia does have some strikeouts in him, so that's why I'm not as on the Rockies as I really should be. Plus, this lineup is just so watered down from what we're used to seeing with them. I just really I like the 3-man here with McMahon, Story, and Blackman. I know Tapia is cheap, but just doesn't have the power. And Cron's been looking a little lost at the plate so far, but that can turn around at any moment as well.
Yeah, and that's, obviously what we're hoping for when we're rostering them. Hopefully under 10% ownership on both sites in a Coors Field game. Guy with 2 home run power and upside for sure. So I'm interested in that. 3,400 on FanDuel. You mentioned Tapia without much power there, and we'll move on to the next game in a sec. But I think there's another interesting guy in that kind of regard on the Astros side of things, not drawing a ton of ownership, leading off in the projected lineup anyway. Miles Straw.
Yeah.
Up now from time to time, not very expensive. He is a speed burner. If he gets on, he's going to be running, and he's going to be circling the bases on some of these doubles, triples that we see in Colorado when the ball doesn't travel out of the park. Is he in consideration for you guys as far as building him into stacks?
Yeah, 2.9K, so cheap. Why not? And he's actually willing to steal a lot more than I feel like Tapia is at the top of the lineup.
Yeah, he's trying to make a name, and it was known for that as a prospect coming up, and had a ridiculous stolen bases season, I think in 2018, I want to say. But it's just been a discernible skill set for him. Alex, you didn't mention him when you were looking for a lower owned bat, and I know you tend to favor the power guys in terms of who you're looking for in these spots. Does that rule Straw out, or are you still willing to work him into an Astros stack before we move on?
No, I think Straw is going to be a killer play if he has a good spot in the order. Since we don't have the lineup, it's hard to speculate a little bit, but since he does have a ton of speed, it wouldn't be surprising if he does lead off, and I think he'd probably be one of the best plays on the team.
Excellent. Love it. Let's move on. We've got the Texas Rangers in Anaheim to take on the Los Angeles Angels. I know those are 2 different cities, but that's how they do things in California. Rangers plus 166 underdogs with a 3.65 implied total. Angels minus 182 favorites, 4.94 with Jordan Lyles on the hill for the Rangers. Shohei Ohtani on the hill for the Angels, making his second start of the year. First one didn't quite go to plan. Came out of it with a 31.8 strikeout rate. That was 7 strikeouts in his 4 and 2/3 innings, but also a 22.7% walk rate because he walked 5 of the hitters he faced. Are we going to any Shohei Ohtani here, Max, against a strikeout-happy Rangers lineup?
All of the Ohtani. I wish they gave him some points for hitting, but we'll deal with just the strikeouts for this game. There's just a ton of strikeouts in this Rangers lineup, and that's really the only reason. And they really don't walk much either, other than Gallo, I guess. Gallo does try to either hit a home run or walk or strike out. So I love Ohtani in the spot, just way underpriced at 7.5K.
Yeah, agreed. I think he's in a killer spot at that price on DraftKings. You can use him as a SP1, quite honestly, over there at that price, but obvious SP2 choice. And I'm going to go right to him at 9,000 on FanDuel. Alex, you seeing Ohtani the same way? And are you willing to roll any Rangers bats coming the other way against him? Looks like they're drawing essentially no ownership, maybe with the exception of Joey Gallo on FanDuel.
I'm a little bit worried with Ohtani because there's this note on Fangraphs that he's going to be limited to 75 pitches. He looked fantastic in his first start, though. So I think with the price and the matchup, he's worth going to even with 75 pitches, but that is a significant knock against him.
Yeah, that's definitely
ownership as well. So people are going to read that. So it's going to limit upside on ownership. So for what that's worth.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it might make sense to consider what does that middle ground give you value-wise in terms of people going away from them. I think it's a spot I'll still get to, even with 75 pitches. I think he could still strike out 7-8 of these guys. No Texas bats for me, maybe 1 or 2 contrarians if I end up with a ton of Ohtani. I do like the Angels bats here, and we're running a little short on time. But Alex, you fond of the Angels bats here going up against a pretty weak pitcher in Jordan Lyles?
Yeah, I mean, they look like great plays. Aside from Trout, everyone's pretty cheap, and they have one of the highest team totals on the slate. Makes sense since LA, although it's cooler than most parks during the summer, it's hotter at this time of year. So I think there's really no reason not to go to the Angels, and it seems like the ownership's not even quite as high as you might think.
Yeah, surprisingly low ownership for a team that ranks out pretty well. I think has gotten mentioned a little bit around the industry. And bottom end of the lineup on FanDuel, average salary $2,100 for the bottom 5 hitters. There's a lot to work with in terms of value. There's a little bit of upside there. They're not the greatest, but Albert Pujols is in there. Scott Schebler, we've seen him go deep against a bad righty from time to time. So I'll definitely be getting to that. I think we do need to move on. Max, what is your favorite bat from the Angels before we move on?
I mean, it's Mike Trout. But
what's your second favorite bat from the Angels?
Scotty Schebler. Let's go 2K Scotty Schebler.
Love it. All right, moving on to the next one. A couple pitchers I think we can roster in this one. We'll fly through them. We've got the Brewers with a plus 106 total, plus 106 dogs, 3.19 implied total. San Diego Padres minus 114 favorites, 3.36 implied total. Lowest total on the slate because we've got Corbin Burns going for the Brewers, Chris Paddock for the Padres. I think this is a pretty good matchup for both pitchers. I'm going to be getting to both of them. Alex, what are you doing with pitchers in this one?
Yeah, Corbin Burns has been lights out this year. So I think he's probably one of the best pitchers to target today, even though the price is top dollar. He's had a 48% strikeout rate over 18 innings, and it's not that hard to buy into his strikeout rate starting with a 4 because he had a 38% strikeout rate last year. So the matchup does suppress strikeouts a little bit versus Milwaukee. Usually their lineup has some, but they just released it. And not quite as many strikeouts today, but I mean, going from 40% to like 36% or something, like he's still the best. So I'm definitely looking at Burns today.
Yeah, well worth the salary there. And I like Paddock. I think there's a bizarre price discrepancy. Paddock is 6,900 on the FanDuel slate. He's 10,000 on the DK slate. A lot of strikeouts in that Brewers lineup sitting there for him against right-handed pitchers. They were, I think, 5th worst in baseball going back to 2019. I'm not rostering any Brewers. I will roster some Padres bats coming against Burns just as a totally contrarian play. Good enough lineup that I think we can do that. Max, close us out here. Give us a home run pick. Talk to us about the Padres bats real quick.
I don't like the Padres bats. Burns is amazing. He's got an xFIP of 1 and like a 20% swinging strike rate. I mean, Padres obviously have a really good lineup. If I was going to play anybody, it's probably going to be like Cronenworth, but they're sitting They're sitting Machado. They're sitting Tatis. So it's a really watered down Padres lineup facing him today. So I actually think that makes the matchup for even better. As far as a home run,
case, I'll have less Padres than I planned. I didn't realize that. I didn't have to confirm. Give me a home run pick.
Home run pick, real quick. Okay, hold on. It's loading.
Alex, give me yours while Max loads his.
All right. Well, one team I'm looking at today for a contrarian spot is the Orioles. DK only, of course. So I mentioned how Mancini is priced up today. So I feel he might be worth taking a shot on, hoping he hits one out of the park.
Love it. Max, you got it?
I got it. Let's go with Ryan Zimmerman against Adam Wainwright.
Awesome. I'm going Adam Duvall in that matchup that nobody liked the Miami Marlins, and he's going to hit a home run today. Guys, we appreciate everybody hanging out. We went a little overtime. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. We're brought to you by No House Advantage. We got basketball shows coming up, big block of them coming up with, I think, Spags and EMAC and everybody's favorites. So tune in for those. Spags and EMAC on Live Before Lock, Lofty and Adam before that on the Deeper Dive. Tyler, take us out of here.